Today I'll talk about Niccolo Machiavelli and his book, The Prince. First I will give a brief information about Niccolo Machiavelli, and I will talk about his masterpiece, The Prince, and its context. After it, I will talk about the relation between a prince and morality in view of Machiavelli. Then I will pass on the reputation of the prince and its importance as it is presented in his book. Then I will give you an opposite idea against the prince, and I'll talk about a contradiction of itself. Then I will talk about Catholicism's teleology and Machiavelli's realism, and I will compare with them together. Then I will lastly talk about the impact of the prince and its examples. So, Niccolo Machiavelli was an Italian historian, philosopher, and a writer during the Renaissance, and he was also one of the founders of the political science, and he was a diplomat as well. But besides, he was called a humanist. This is important, I'll talk about it later. And his masterpiece was a book called The Prince, which influenced all of his contemporaries. So, the prince, in his book, he talks about how should a prince act when he needs to decide on crucial matters. And then he argues how a state should be governed by the prince himself. He asks about questions about the acts of the prince and methods that he should use while he ruled the state. Then he gives an example of the reputation of the prince and the power he has, and he says the reputation of the prince is much more important. So, and lastly, it talks about a realist ideology that he suggests in his book. So, the relation between a prince and morality. He says in his book, the prince can massacre people of a newly acquired state, and it may be regarded as moral, because he says that the primary duty of the prince is to rule the state he has invaded. So it will be moral to regard a massacre for prince. But for example, for a newly acquired state, there may be some problems, because the people of that state will be having their own rules, and they will be used to their own freedom, and they will have their own culture. So he says that for this reason, it may cause some problems for the prince. So he expresses that one must be a fox in order to recognize traps, and a lion to frighten off the wolves. So he uses the expression lion for the prince, and it shows that it gives importance to power of the prince. And the reputation of the prince and its importance. While he talks about these terms, he talks about reputation as well. He says to be reputable is much more important to seek for moral values. So, for example, he gives an example, and it is that there's a state, and there's a situation like there are so many states that the prince cannot control all of the states. So, in a situation like that, the prince should observe all of the threats of these states, and he should single out the most insecure state. Then he should go that state, and then he should settle down there. By settling down in the most insecure state, the prince will manage not only dominating that area, but also he will create some images, and these images can be shown that the prince wants to rule that state, and he will not let happen rebels, and he will try to dominate them. So the rebels will know that it will not be easy to rebel against the prince where he lives in. So the prince will show off his power and his will to the people of that state. And while the situation is like that in his book that he shows, after it, there are so many opposite ideas were put against him. One of them, there's Strauss. He criticized him and his immorality, and notes that even if we were forced to grant that Machiavelli was essentially a patriot or scientist, we would not be forced to deny that he was a teacher of evil. So, Strauss says that Machiavelli was a teacher of evil, and this term evil can contain so many meanings, and it is actually a big deal to use it, because we are talking about a humanist. But Strauss says he was a teacher of evil, and we can see these evil things in his book, which is like he suggests that the priest should use or may use brute force on people, on civil servants as well. And he says the deceit or the massacres can be the main theme of the priest when it is needed. So, however, the situation seems like Machiavelli has some immoral values. Why he was so important, why he was so impressive on his contemporaries and for future generations. He talks about Machiavelli's realism, and there's a realist ideology of himself. But for his epoch, there was a group of Catholicism's teleology, and this teleology was disregarding the needs of the individuals and the wills of the common man. And Catholicism's teleology was stifling innovation, enterprise, and relationships between people and in the public. So it was limiting the control of nature by human beings. However, Machiavelli's realism is against this. Machiavelli says that people need realism instead of idealism, because idealism is not practical. So people should see the facts and the realism. He says people must control the nature and themselves, and people must control their own fortunes instead of waiting for the chances to come out. And in his book, he talks about especially the prince must have the virtue and prudence of a leader. And one of the things that he suggests, the immorality, injustice, and evil lawfulness can be the main theme of the prince when it is necessary. So, Machiavelli shows brute facts or crude facts to us, and for example, about his immorality and injustice. Today you cannot say that there is a proper justice, or for example, for our country, we cannot say there is proper democracy. Everything is just idealistic. There is no brute facts. So, Machiavelli has a point here. And if we talk about the impact of the prince and its examples, I will give you two examples. And one of them, the King Henry VIII was affected by Machiavelli and in his tactics and in his turn towards Protestantism. During the pilgrimage of grace, there was rebellions, and the King Henry VIII ordered of killing 216 people, and the victims were including lords and knights, half a dozen abbots, 38 monks, and 16 priests. So, the King Henry used his power to stop a rebellion, and he just used it without thinking any moral values. He just showed his power. And the other example is St. Bartholomew's Day Massacre, which is much more bigger than the pilgrimage to grace. It was during the sway of Charles V, and Paris was dominated by the extreme Catholics. However, a prince of France wanted to marry with Protestants. So there's a contradiction here. There are extreme Catholics, and a princess of France wants to marry with a Protestant. Some of the Catholics, extreme Catholics, decided to snap the marriage of the prince. To stop this, Charles V ordered of killing a group of Huguenots. But however, in a few weeks, the massacre spread throughout the other urban centers, and at the end, the number of the dead people was changed from at least 5,000 to 30,000. The massacre marked a turning point in the French wars of religion, and it stopped the movement of Huguenots, and it was helped by the power of the prince itself. And there was an image after this: Catholicism was a bloody and treacherous religion. We can say that Machiavelli affected both Catholicism and Protestantism. And one of the impacts of Machiavelli on the political thinking of founding fathers of the United States, Benjamin Franklin, James Madison, Thomas Jefferson, was affected by the ideas of Machiavelli. However, Alexander Hamilton learned from Machiavelli about the importance of foreign policy for domestic policy, and a republic needed to be rapacious at times in order to survive, he said. He's talking about being rapacious, which means being greedy. We can see today what America does, and we can say that America, one of the most capitalist countries in the world, and we can see their acts towards people. And one of the founding fathers of the United States, John Adams, was also studied Machiavelli, and it was the person who studied Machiavelli most. And he wrote a book called A Defense of the Constitutions of Government of the United States of America. And in the 20th century, Antonio Gramsci inspired profoundly by Machiavelli, and he wrote the book Passive Revolution. He argued in his book that our society can be manipulated by controlling its popular notions of morality. Considering all of these, we can say that Machiavelli sometimes caused massacres, sometimes revolutions, and he directly affected so many people and their lives. And indirectly, he caused so many books to be written. There were so many books which were published against Machiavelli, and they were books which were published in accordance with Machiavelli's thoughts. Machiavelli set a new course to people reconsider their lives, their thinking style about their own lives, and how they should control their own fortune. Today we can see the influences of Machiavelli and what he caused, and still he has been some influence on people today as well. Thank you for participating.
Thank you very much.